welcome back to the Mind Castle podcast. I'm here with Reagan, Reagan Schrock, which is my brother, and my name is Austin Schrock. AustinSchrock.com, ReaganSchrock.com.
Yes.
And we form the Mind Castle podcast, and where we talk about things that we're learning and growing in, and things that are stretching us, and we try to condense those things down and give them back to you guys, so that hopefully you guys can learn as well, learn with us, and learn from the different things that we've discovered, and hopefully grow and learn as well, because that's a lot of what makes up a very healthy and engaging life, in our opinion. Today we're talking about the mosaic of knowledge, and this touches in with a little bit of what we talked about in our last episode, talking about curiosity. And one of the things we had mentioned in that was, the fact that like I'm learning Spanish and other things like that. And it kind of got us thinking a little bit of like, what are some actual practical examples of following this curiosity? What does that look like, and how does that affect our life and tie into our life? So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. A few of the things we're going to talk about is, yes, learning Spanish. We're going to talk about skydiving, and we're going to talk about, which we've never talked about on this podcast before. And we're also going to talk about polar plunges, and what does that all have to do with curiosity, and how does that affect our life? I guess more specifically, like what does that do to the framework of our reality? So, Reagan, I'm very proud of myself. Do you know why?
Well, because you can speak Spanish.
Well, just a little bit. But so I pride myself in being able to influence people, right? I'm technically kind of like an influencer, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. YouTuber. Yeah.
But,
I see what you did there.
But yeah. My favorite people that, like, when I feel like I've achieved success is when I can influence my family to do something, and where they actually do it and enjoy it. And last Thanksgiving, my brother-in-law, Kyle, who was always up for a challenge, I was talking to him and I was like, just out of the blue, I was like, so we doing polar plunges this Thanksgiving? And he's like, didn't even miss a beat. Well, yeah, of course we're doing it. I was like, oh, sweet. And at that point, I've been taking cold showers for about a year. Right now,
which is the theme of this podcast, cold showers
as well. I've been taking cold showers for over 2 years now.
It's been at
pretty
least
awesome.
2 years.
And so anyway, last Thanksgiving, we bought like 25 pounds of ice, filled up this isn't like, Thanksgiving, so it's already cold. We filled up their bathtub with ice and with water, and it got down to like 50 degrees.
Yeah, so it wasn't brutal.
It wasn't like brutal.
It was pretty brutal.
It was cold.
It was brutal, but not like brutal.
Yeah, definitely. And anyway, so I convinced basically everyone in my family to do it. One of my nieces did it. My oldest sister did it, which I never saw coming. Both of my sisters did it. Yeah, both of them did it. My oldest brother Jonathan did it.
He about died, but yes.
He about died. It was hilarious.
We all about died.
Yeah,
it's
Reagan
a
did
shock,
it.
Man.
I did it. Kyle did it. My brother-in-law. It was great. I was feeling very proud of myself. And then I come home and blah, 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 blah. Fast forward a while, go to SMBI, keep doing cold showers, convinced like my entire dorm to do cold showers. They
really
all on their own. It was so great.
No kidding. Wow. You are persuasive.
I didn't even like do anything. Anyway.
Yeah, right.
I didn't guilt trip them at all. So then
scream in pain.
I come home and I'm like, all right, it's time to level up. I'm going to make a polar plunge. So
for the audience, can you explain what a polar plunge is?
A polar plunge is where you have a tub of some sort that's always set up, and the water is always kept below 50 degrees if possible. Preferably a technical polar plunge is like 33-degree water, Arctic.
Really? I actually didn't know that.
Polar, like North Pole plunge is like when you plunge in water that's actually it would be below freezing because of the salt water. So technically, that's what a polar plunge is. I usually say about 50 or below, because
that's pretty standard. I think
50 degrees and lower is where your body will react to it, despite outside of your control. Above 50 degrees, you can pretty much control yourself. Like you can control your breathing. You're not gonna lose it. But below 50 is like your first time. You will not be able to control your body. It's just kind of a natural phenomenon.
It's pretty wild.
Pretty awesome.
It's hard to describe.
And so yeah. I built one. So I bought a freezer and I took all the electronics out of it and everything. And it basically serves as a giant ice chest. I fill it up with water, and then I freeze water bottles, like 24 packs of water bottles, and like interchange them so that it keeps the water right around 50 degrees. And so yeah, I was doing that for a little while. It was great. And then out of the blue, my brother-in-law proceeds to send me a message. Not the same brother-in-law that was excited about polar plunging at Thanksgiving, different one. Sends me a message and is like, just like bombards me with like 60 messages. And I'm like, what in the world? And I open it up, and here it's a photo montage of him building his entire own polar plunge. And I was like, okay, this is cool. So he built one himself out of a giant trash can. And it's really nice. Like, it's very, very nice. He made it very, very, built a frame around it. You can't even tell that that's what it is. And he keeps it around like 40 degrees, which I haven't quite figured out how to get mine that cold yet. I'm trying to figure out a way to do it without spending money. Every morning I wake up and I jump in the polar plunge within about 5 minutes of waking up. Or if I go work out, then I'll come home and then get in the polar plunge.
How long are you in it?
3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty standard for cold therapy exposure, right? Like,
yeah, that
and
would
just to be clear for everybody listening, like, be careful with this because who was it? Our brother was telling us about this. Someone who did it and was like, "I'm going hardcore. I'm going to go 20 minutes." And it like actually kind of it messed him up for a day.
Oh.
You know, don't do that. Be a little careful. But yeah, a couple minutes of cold exposure ain't gonna hurt you. It's going to be amazing.
Unless you're experienced, you shouldn't do anything like that.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. It was his first time, you know.
Yeah, because you'll actually go into hypothermia.
Well, that's kind of what happened. Yeah, he was cold for the rest of the day, like frigid cold. So, anyways,
bad idea. So anyway, that's something that happened, and I've been doing that for about 3 months now.
And why are you doing
3
this?
months? I am doing that. So yeah, we're talking about this curiosity doohickey. We're thinking about like the framework of life, curiosity that takes us outside of our comfort zone, has a way of expanding our fabric of reality. And that's the main reason why I do it, because it is a daily discipline that is very challenging, and it has a remarkable effect on my mental endurance, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And it has a way of like expanding reality, kind of almost like you think about the world differently, because when you've experienced something like that, it's incredibly empowering, right? Because it's like every day when your foot touches the water, it's like, there's no way. But then you do it and it's like, you get out and you're like, wow, like I feel incredible. Like I did that. And like every part of me did not want to, but I still did it. Starting your day like that is so empowering. So that's the main reason why I do it. Not to mention you get some huge like benefits.
Yeah, the health benefits
are actually awesome.
Unbelievable.
I used to not do it for the health benefits, but now I kind of do it for the health benefits. Like, because I didn't realize exactly what it was doing, but it's really awesome.
Yeah, there's a ton of science on this, and it's fairly well. It's not fairly new. It's just it hasn't been researched as extensively until more recently, and they're realizing just how good some cold exposure is every day.
Yeah,
what it does for your body and everything from blood flow to muscle development to recovery if you're in athletics to I mean just the
energy,
mental energy,
oh man,
your mental
energy,
fatigue and drowsiness,
it's incredible.
But there's also something about the mental, especially the mental fortitude of it. If you're doing something every day that feels kind of impossible, but then you actually do it and you're like, oh, okay, that actually wasn't that big a deal. Like, it's just cold water. It's just cold water. You can sit in cold water. You know, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's going to be very uncomfortable, but you can do it.
Yeah.
And that's hard because our brains try to kill us, trying to tell us we're getting killed, like we're going to die.
Pretty much.
And you're not. You're fine. Being able to push through that is probably one of the more important mental development things a person can do. I'm not going to say the most, obviously not most, but in a lot lot it is really, it's almost like therapy. For your brain.
In fact,
I mean,
like back when, like way back before depression was diagnosed as like an actual thing, they called it like melancholy something or another.
Yeah.
Cold therapy was their treatment for it. Yeah. So like,
no way.
Oh yeah, you're depressed. Alrighty, 30 days of polar plunges for you, buddy. And
that would actually probably help.
It actually dramatically works.
Wow.
Some really cool stuff is they're starting to research that again now and prescribe it and whatever.
Anyways,
so yeah, polar plunges are awesome. The other thing is I am learning Spanish currently, and I'm also in 2 days going to go and begin my skydiving training. So kind of 3 major things where it's like, here's a thread of curiosity that I'm going to pull on. And it's like, what's going to happen? And also like, you know, I'm just also like really, really curious to see what's going to come out of that. Right. Like Spanish, you never know where you're going to use that or need that. Like,
yeah. Why Spanish versus any other language?
Spanish is something that a lot of my friends know. And it's also probably one of the easiest languages that you could learn. to start out with that you're actually going to use.
There are easier ones for the record.
There are,
you're not going to use them. I think one of the easiest is like Indonesian or something for American speakers. You're not going to use that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's mostly why. And I had already taken a little bit in high school, so I had a foundation for it. Yeah. You just never know what that's going to do to your world. Like your world is suddenly so much bigger because you understand their culture better. You understand how they think and how they see the world. Like when you start learning that, like the ways that I think doesn't have an equivalent in their language, it just becomes so fascinating because then you start realizing, oh, they're thinking this certain thing that doesn't have an equivalent in my language. So like, what actually does that mean for them? Like, we don't know. It's an expression. It's a way of processing the world. It's just so cool. And then skydiving, it's like, it's kind of like the first time that I did the polar plunge, which was actually 32.5-degree water. It's like, I don't know what's going to happen.
I might die.
Like every ounce of me is like, you're going to die. Like what you're doing here is like death. And like your body is trying to stop you avidly from doing that. So there's also that part of it where it's like, I want to put myself in that position where mentally I have to learn to control and manipulate my body to keep it from trying to protect itself because I know better. And so that's what I'm most looking forward to about Spanish and about skydiving, things like that, because you can learn to manipulate that skill in really cool ways. And I'm just so excited about that because it's a way of and like, you see the world differently. Like I went skydiving once, tandem, and like you see the world differently. Like it is different. It's the first time you've ever fallen out of an airplane
for a whole mile.
You might want to add. You can never see the world the same way ever again. Same thing with Spanish. I still remember the very first time I was in the Dominican Republic and I was talking to a lady there. I actually stayed at her house for 2 days and she didn't know any English and actually didn't know very much. Like she knew how to talk Spanish, but she couldn't like spell in Spanish. It was a very, very primitive place where we were at. Like I would ask her to spell things and she's like, I don't know.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I still remember the very first time we had got back from a program that we had late in the evening and she was up waiting and she loved to hang out with us. And I was the only one in my group that really spoke Spanish, more or less. Like I don't want to make it sound like I'm fluent or anything. I'm definitely not, but I know enough to communicate depending on the topic. Anyway, so she comes in and she's like, how's your evening? How's the program? How are you? And just rattling off in Spanish. And Spanish there is very sloppy. Like they drop words or they drop like letters and things.
As compared to like official, proper Spanish.
Like we would say a bottle and the equivalent would be like saying bottle.
Oh, yeah.
Like they just like drop the last little bit of the word.
That
and when you have an
like,
entire sentence like that, it's like,
dude, it was like that in Liberia.
It's so hard. Yeah.
In Liberia, they speak English, but I couldn't understand it because they abbreviate everything.
Right.
So it's essentially its own dialect.
It is. We say I'm
cool.
going to.
It's just
is the same as I'm gonna do this. Wow. I'm gonna do that. I'm going to. It's like
that's cool.
Imagine hearing that. But so anyway, she was asking me about it, and it was so cool because later on we started talking about her neighbors that would routinely stay up to like 3 a.m. playing really loud music, and she was just complaining about how she could never sleep and it was annoying and stuff. I started asking her about like her what she believes and all this stuff. We started talking about Christianity and like asked her about her neighbors and like you could just see like she communicated that like she has a burden for her neighbors, and she also is like that she found it really sad, right? That their life was the way that it was because it was very unhealthy. And from her perspective, at least, like I didn't fully understand, but from her perspective, it was a burden for her and she like carried that weight. And like, I still remember the very first time I like grasped that and understood that from her. I saw the world through her eyes only because I had expanded my framework to include another language. And that will never leave my memory. I don't think. It was so eye-opening to me to actually hear her explain her life and her struggles or her trials of like normal life of, an old single lady that is living in a community kind of by herself. I don't know. There was something about that moment that was similar to doing a polar plunge for the first time. That's similar to going skydiving for the first time. That I just like, you can't quite find any other way. And it would have never started if it wouldn't have begun with that curiosity of like, I wonder what happens if I do this. Like what actually happens if I do this?
It's like, there's this concept of creating your own luck. Like you open the horizons in for yourself, or you put yourself in those positions for new things. And I think being curious does that because it opens up possibilities and frameworks. I like to use the word frameworks or worldview systems that you couldn't have like any other way. You really can't get them unless you go through this whatever experience or learn this particular thing. And that's kind of a big deal, actually. And because there's a lot of people out there who would prefer not to, and that's fine. I mean, hey, but it can really limit the perspective options. you know what I mean? Like your perspectives are just not, you won't have as many. And this, let's be careful that we don't make it sound like we've got all this. We definitely don't, because this is something we're still learning. But I really think you're onto something there.
Yeah. And it's super fun.
That's the other cool part.
It's not easy. Obviously, a lot of these things aren't easy, but they're super, super fun and super rewarding. Talking about curiosity just kind of sparked a lot of those things for me. Like thinking about those things, it's like, this is cool. And that's kind of what I want to dedicate a lot of my life to. And also like try to communicate that through my YouTube channel, as it were. Like I really admire Tim Ferriss for that, because he'll be like, I wonder if I could learn kickboxing in 5 days and win a tournament. It's like, well, you know what? Let's try it. Okay, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And guess what? He like does really, really well at it, and he breaks it down and learns incredibly fast. But it all started because it's like, I wonder what would happen if I do this. Some really, really cool things have come out of that, and he's inspired millions of people because of his life. And it's like, okay, that's really cool, and that never would have happened before. I guess like it's not all about inspiring other people, or it's not going to make you rich and all this stuff, but it could provide a rich life of experiences.
That's what I think I'm getting at. Yeah. Because just going back to, again, I wrote a newsletter on this, kind of like, what's the point of learning new things? And because I'd been writing some on curiosity and why, why I think it's good and stuff. But like, what is the point? Because I had given some examples of, just stuff I've been diving into this year, which is, it's very broad. It's just like, apparently I'm curious about, blah, blah, blah right now, rocket engineering in the 1960s or whatever it might be. So what is the point? And it comes back to another key piece of this podcast, first principles.
Yeah.
Which is essentially, finding out what are the core elements of how reality works. Like, why are things the way they are, basically. I think it's really important to understand like how we got here. And why, like what decisions and things got us to this place, and how the world functions. I actually kind of look at it through that lens, like that curiosity lens of trying these things, because it's opening up frameworks and helps get a sense of, okay, here's how this works, here's how that works, here's why the world functions the way it does. Obviously, that's a very big thing. You'll never master it. Obviously, the world's very complicated. But I think that is one of the things why I'm so endlessly curious about such a wide range, like a really wide range. And it used to kind of bother me. And sometimes maybe it is a little bit overboard, but like it actually doesn't bother me nearly that much as it used to, because it's actually like I'll have these random pieces that I was curious about, and then 6 months later or something, I'll see them tie into things in my life in a very helpful, very meaningful way that I wouldn't have seen that. It's like pattern recognition, essentially.
It is.
Yeah. So basically, I want to better understand the human experience, and then with that, like why people in the past made the decisions they did to get us here today. Like I just finished reading a book on Alexander the Great. I guess I'm into Greek history now, because I've been reading a lot of Greek history suddenly this year. It's kind of random. But I'm realizing like the decisions he made directly impact our lives right now, like in ways that we can't even fathom it. And that was 2,000 years ago. It made just such a big difference. And that is actually, maybe that's important, like maybe we should understand some more of that, because then it's like, oh, that's why this thing is that way. And that's why, wait a second. And then that's why, this, oh man, like so many pieces started coming together.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother podcast, by the way. Alexander the Great was like a legend, but also kind of a savage, and also like a really bad guy in a lot of ways, like depopulating entire countries and things like that. Pretty evil stuff. But anyways, so here's an example. I've been fascinated with mosaics lately. Just like mosaics are just awesome. So we were in Italy last fall, and we got to see some of the earliest examples of Christian mosaics in an old church there. They're from like 300 AD. Insanely old for Christian. There's not that many like books and monuments and things that survived, because the first 200 years of Christianity was heavily, heavily persecuted. So there wasn't a lot preserved. And anyway, so these mosaics, they're amazing, beautiful mosaics. They're really neat. They're intricate. They're made of tons of little tiny pieces, But, if you look at each individual piece, like a mosaic, they're cubes of different colored stone, essentially. You look at an individual piece, it makes no sense. It's pointless. You even look at like a section of a mosaic, because like some of them had been damaged. You can only see like pieces of them. Still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it's only when you step back and you actually look at the whole thing, it's like the ambiguity ends and the picture is now clear. And that's how I think of this mosaic of knowledge that we're talking about. The more pieces you can add to that mosaic of this framework of the world and where I live in it and how decisions are made and what it looks like and how it works, the more the mosaic will start making sense.
Right.
That's how I view acquiring knowledge or being curious or trying new things. That's what I think of. In essence, we're building our own mosaic of the world.
Yeah.
But that also keeps us really humble because we know we'll never actually finish the mosaic. It will keep you very humble. And it also helps you see that the next person out there is also building a mosaic, but their mosaic may look very, very different because they're using different perspectives and worldviews. So when I interact with them, it should keep me humble, knowing that they are looking at this from a different angle. They might know something I don't know, even if we just completely disagree. You know what? They're looking at a different mosaic.
Yeah.
They just are. Like humans do not, we're just different from each other.
Yeah.
And that I think really helps keep me grounded and helps me understand, I'll never complete the mosaic of the world, but I think it will help. I know it does. It helps me along the way.
Yeah.
As I try to make decisions about life and so forth. And of course, besides that, learning new things is just fun. So why not? So anyways, there we are.
The thing I want to mention here is like a lot of this it's subjective, right? Like what we're curious about, it's nice because you don't have to compare it. There's no comparison. It's not like, oh man, he's curious about scuba diving. I need to be curious about scuba diving.
Man, scuba diving is wild. I just read a book about that.
Free diving is cooler.
No, scuba is insane, man.
So like it's all very like, and it doesn't have to be this big, exaggerated, cool thing. It's whatever brings a little spark to your life and whatever helps you grow and something that keeps you excited to keep learning. Like it doesn't have to be extravagant. Fun fact, perfect example. My dad, you probably don't even know this. My dad loves water towers. Don't ask me why. He'll be driving along the interstate, whipping out his phone and like, water tower, taking pictures of the cool water towers because they have cool art on them and stuff and different kinds and older and different models and stuff.
The engineering on those things is insane.
He loves them. And it's like, okay, that's really cool. Not exactly my cup of tea, but like he loves it and he's really curious about it and he's following it and it's cool. Like he's got a whole folder on his phone just for water towers. It's very entertaining to watch him geek out about it.
That is
like
wild.
It doesn't have to be this big, giant, extravagant thing and whatever else. And we need to be careful not to down other people's curiosities because they're different than ours.
Yeah,
and all that. There's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is use discernment because ideas do have consequences. We do need to be careful what strings we pull on because. Like there are some malicious things out there that can really be detrimental. So for the most part, if you follow your curiosities, you'll be pretty much okay usually. But you do need to have a little bit of discernment in deciding, okay, like is this really worth my time? Is this going to make me a better person? Are there dangers here?
It depends on the genre, man.
It does. It does. Like even just in books and reading and stuff, you can quickly encounter things that are very contrary to what you believe and what is your worldview.
So like curious about, history and how things develop. Okay, that's one thing. Or curious about, the fundamental laws of mathematics or physics or astronomy. Great. That stuff you can't
hard to go wrong with that.
Yeah, like
it's just fact.
Theoretically it's possible, but then you start getting into like some of the philosophy.
Yeah.
You start getting into Nietzsche or some of these guys that are like, God is dead and nihilism and it's all pointless. Okay, you're getting into some scary stuff really fast because then you start going down the street. Well, it's not really worth living, and that was his thing. I mean, like some of the greatest these nihilistic philosophers, some of them would end up suicidal and or end their lives and stuff because it was so bleak.
Yeah,
so there are clear areas of boundary.
Right, boundaries is a good way to put it.
Yeah, boundaries. Yeah, so basically it's like, well, and that's the thing with philosophy, like, oh man, I mean, or you can go down the Stoicism route because it's like having a revival right now. Stoicism is. And, okay, it's got a few good things, but then I read, Meditations of a Marcus Aurelius because it's like, everybody should read this book. It's amazing. Wow. Yeah. So I got the new translation and it's going to be awesome. And I read it and I was like, this is so much garbage. I can't even finish this. This is so bad.
If other people enjoy it, cool. But
that's great if you learn something from it, but you read it and it's just like so depressing. It's just, this is just the way life is and you're just going to die. die and it's just pointless and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, man, how is this a good book? This is terrible. I'm sad now. Leave me alone,
That's
Marcus.
why the books about it, like by Ryan Holiday, take about a sentence.
Yeah, don't read the whole thing, man.
Very selective.
Literally, it was like read a paragraph or two a day, and it was like, okay, I've had my depression for the day. Now let's go read something interesting. Like this is horrible. Anyways, we're getting on the way down the rabbit hole of. But that was another thing, I was curious, so I checked it out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're curious about, how they launched men to the moon, that sign me up. I can hit you up on all kinds of stuff.
Or if you're curious about how to keep learning and like growing and stuff, just follow this podcast or our YouTube channels.
Oh, shameless plug.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's pretty much going to wrap up this episode. Interesting little connection and example of some of the things we're curious about. And also, like a little bit more broad, expanding your frameworks of reality and of life and changing the ways that you see the world. If you don't do it intentionally, life will force you to do it at times, and it's not very pleasant. Yeah. So doing that intentionally, being proactive about it is really good. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and end this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and you can find notes and links and such like down in the show notes of this episode. And if it isn't already, this episode is probably going to be on YouTube as well. We don't have video for it yet, but we will probably have a YouTube channel here at some point. So you can keep an eye out there and support us over there if you would like as well. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.